saved a dying, half-blind foal everyone gave up on. Years later at a funeral, she stepped on the coffin, and when the lid broke, everyone around was shocked to hear something crying. The morning sun crept over the hills, spilling soft gold across the weathered wooden stables. I'd stand there every day, breathing in the sweet, earthy scent of hay, mingled with the warm, musky smell of horses. It was my favorite place where the world felt right. I'm Emily, and for as long as I can remember, animals have been my whole life. Our family farm stretched wide across the rolling land, dotted with green pastures and old oak trees. It was a haven, a place where every creature, whether a tiny kitten hiding in the barn or a massive draft horse plowing the fields, found a home. My parents were the ones who lit that spark in me. Mom had a gentle way about her, kneeling beside a nervous mare with a voice so calm it could hush the wind. She'd guide my small hands to stroke the horse's flank, teaching me how patience could turn fear into trust. "Take your time, Emily," she'd say, her hazel eyes crinkling at the corners. "They'll come to you when they're ready." Dad was different, but just as steady. He'd scoop me up before I could even toddle properly, plopping me onto our old pony's broad back. His big, calloused hands held me firm as he grinned. "Horses see your heart, Emily. They know who cares, who really sees them." I'd giggle, clutching the mane, feeling the pony's warmth beneath me. Those early days shaped me. Before the rooster crowed, I'd slip out of bed, my bare feet hitting the cold floor, and dash to the stables. The air was crisp, carrying the faint chirp of crickets fading into dawn. I'd push open the heavy door and the horses would greet me, a soft shuffle of hooves on straw, a low whinny from the far stall. I'd grab a brush and work their coats until they gleamed like polished wood in the morning light. Sometimes I'd talk to them about the clouds drifting by, or the way the wind rustled the trees, or just silly things like what I'd eaten for breakfast. They'd flick their ears, listening, and I'd feel like they understood me in a way people never could. When Mom and Dad grew older, time seemed to slow them down. Their shoulders hunched from years of lifting bales and mending fences. I watched them fade, first Mom with her quiet smile, then Dad with his steady laugh. They left me the farm, not just the land and the animals, but their lessons of kindness and care. Taking it over wasn't about money or tradition. It was about keeping their memory alive, about living the way they'd taught me. The farm was my promise to them, written in every blade of grass and every hoof print in the dirt. But I didn't run it like they did, not exactly. Other farmers around us bred horses for strength or speed, chasing ribbons at county fairs. I went a different way. I couldn't ignore the broken ones, the ones nobody wanted. Maybe it was Mom's gentle touch I saw in them, or Dad's belief that every soul had worth. Whatever it was, my barn turned into a refuge. There was a mare with a limp so bad other farmers would have sent her to slaughter. I coaxed her back to walking, then trotting until she could chase the wind again. A gelding, half-blind and skittish, came next. He'd been retired too young, but I taught him to trust my voice. Then a stallion, wild-eyed and jumpy, who'd never known a kind hand. With time, he'd lower his head for me to scratch his ears. Folks around town shook their heads. "You're wasting your time, Emily," they'd say over coffee at the diner. "Those animals won't ever pay you back." I'd just smile and sip my mug. They didn't get it. When that limping mare nickered at me, or the gelding nudged my shoulder, or the stallion finally stood still under my hand, it wasn't about money. It was about seeing something bloom where others saw only ruin. Every scar on their hides told a story of grit. Every hesitant step they took was a win. And when they pressed their noses to my palm, soft and warm, it reminded me that broken things just need someone to believe they're enough. My days settled into a rhythm. Dawn pulled me to the stables, where I'd check water troughs and toss fresh hay. The horses would crowd the fence, their breath puffing in the cool air, waiting for their breakfast. I'd move from stall to stall, running my hands over their sides, feeling for anything off. Dusk found me still there, the sky turning pink and orange as I made sure every animal was settled. The local vet, Sarah, started dropping by more often. She'd roll up in her dusty truck, her vet bag slung over her shoulder, ready to help me patch up the sick ones. Sometimes we'd win, watching a fever break or a wound heal. Sometimes we'd lose, and I'd sit by a stall, tears stinging my eyes, stroking a mane until the end came. But every animal that crossed my threshold felt love, even if it was just for a little while. The farm changed over time. I turned part of the farmhouse into a makeshift clinic. The kitchen table held bandages and bottles of medicine, their sharp, clean smell mixing with the wood smoke from the fireplace. The spare bedroom became a recovery ward, with blankets piled high for the weakest ones. My family, cousins and aunts who'd stop by with casseroles, thought I'd lost my mind. "You're turning the place into a zoo, Em," my cousin Jake would tease, ruffling my hair. But they'd stick around, helping me lift a crate or hold a squirming patient for Sarah. They saw how every animal that pulled through made me stand a little taller, ready to take on the next one. Years rolled by and word got around. People started showing up at my gate with their lost causes. A goat too old to walk, a colt born too small, a dog with a mangled leg. They'd heard I wouldn't say no. Each new arrival brought a challenge, a chance to prove something. Some days broke my heart, like when a lamb slipped away despite every trick Sarah and I tried. Other days lifted me up, like when that colt took his first shaky steps and bawled for his bottle. It was hard, messy work, but it filled my life with meaning. That's how the farm became what it was, a place where broken things healed, where the unwanted found a spot to belong. Love was the medicine I swore by, stronger than any pill. I didn't know it then, but all those years were leading me to something bigger, something that'd change everything. It started with a half-blind foal named Luna, a tiny soul who'd teach me more about life and love than I ever thought I could learn. It was a chilly afternoon when I drove out to Jack's place. The gravel road crunched under my boots as I followed him across his patchy fields. The wind bit through my coat, tugging at my scarf. But it wasn't the cold that made me shiver. Jack had called about a foal he was ready to give up on, and his offhand talk of putting her down hit me hard. I knew that feeling, the pull to help when no one else would. "There she is," Jack said, jerking his chin toward a sagging lean-to in a neglected paddock. He waved a hand like he was shooing a fly. "Not much to look at, huh?" I stepped closer, my breath catching. She was tiny, huddled against the splintered boards. Her coat was a dull gray-brown, patchy and thin, with ribs jutting out like the spokes of a broken wheel. One eye was clouded over, milky and useless, and she trembled, her frail body shaking in the gusts. But then she lifted her head, fixing her good eye on me. That single, clear gaze held a flicker, a stubborn spark of life buried under all that weakness. My throat tightened and tears prickled behind my eyes. "Her mom got sick after foaling," Jack said, scuffing his boot in the hay. "Died quick, some infection, I reckon. This one's been fading ever since. Won't take the bottle right, can't walk steady. Kinder to end it than let her waste away." She tried to stand then, her spindly legs quivering like they might snap. She fell, scrambled, tried again. That fight in her. It was like looking at every animal I'd ever saved, every soul that refused to quit. I couldn't look away. "How much?" I said, my voice low but firm. Jack barked a laugh, sharp and rough, making her flinch. "You're kidding, Emily. She ain't worth the bullet it'd take." "How much?" I said again, turning to him, my jaw set. He shook his head, muttering about my sanity, but tossed out a price so low it stung. I doubled it, yanking my checkbook from my pocket right there in the mud. Getting her to my truck was slow work. She couldn't walk, so I scooped her up, her bones sharp against my arms. She was light as a bundle of sticks, this little life I was betting on. The drive home was quiet, just the hum of the engine and the creak of the seat. I kept glancing back, watching her sway with the bumps, that good eye locked on me like she was studying me too. "Luna," I said softly, testing it out. "That's you, my little moonbeam, my fighter." Back home, I turned the tack room into her space. I hauled in armfuls of straw, piling it thick and soft, and rigged up heat lamps to chase off the winter chill. She crumpled as soon as I laid her down, but that eye stayed on me, watchful. I mixed warm milk replacer, the bottle slippery in my hands, and knelt beside her. She wouldn't take it at first, turning her head, too tired or too scared. I sat there for hours, dripping milk onto her tongue, stroking her thin neck until she swallowed. By dawn, my back ached. My shirt was soaked with spills, but she'd taken enough to spark a tiny hope. "Come on, sweet girl," I whispered, watching her wobble to her knees. "You've got this. We've got this." Sarah came the next day, her stethoscope glinting in the dim light. "She's weak, Emily," she said, her voice gentle but honest. "Odds aren't good." I nodded, but inside, I wasn't giving up. We mapped out a plan. Feedings every few hours, medicine for her eye, prayers for luck. The days blurred into nights of worry. Luna's progress crept along. Some mornings, she'd manage a step or two, her hooves scraping the floor. Other times, she'd lie still, and I'd hover, holding my breath until her chest rose again. But bit by bit, she fought. Her first nicker, a raspy little sound, brought tears streaming down my face. When she stood to drink without my help, I whooped loud enough to startle the chickens. Jack swung by a month later, leaning in the tack room doorway. "Well, I'll be," he said, scratching his chin as I brushed Luna's strengthening frame. "You're actually keeping her alive." Luna turned her back on him, pressing closer to me, her warmth solid against my side. I didn't say a word. She'd said it all. She was mine, and I was hers. Years slipped by, and Luna grew into something incredible. Her coat turned glossy, a deep chestnut that caught the sun. Her body filled out, strong and graceful, though that cloudy eye stayed. She'd prance around me, stealing my hat with a playful nip or tugging my sleeve for a pat. We had a bond deeper than anything I'd known. When I was worn out from the farm, she'd rest her head on my shoulder, her breath steady against my neck. When I laughed, she'd kick up her heels, joining in. She even took to the other rescues, standing watch over a shaky foal or curling up beside an injured fawn, her quiet presence a comfort. Luna showed me what strength really meant, not perfection, but pushing through. She became the farm's heart, a story whispered across the county. Kids would visit, their eyes wide as I told them about the foal who shouldn't have made it. She'd stand proud, letting them stroke her nose, gentle as a breeze. Every night we'd wander to her favorite meadow, the sunset glowing red and gold. Her heartbeat thumped under my hand, strong and alive, a far cry from the faint flutter I'd felt when she arrived. I didn't know it yet, but she was building up to something bigger, something that'd tie us together forever. That autumn crept in slow and heavy, the air crisp with the bite of falling leaves. My body wasn't what it used to be. My heart had started faltering months back, a quiet ache that grew louder with every passing day. The doctors had stern faces and clipped words, telling me to rest, to let go of the farm chores I'd done since I was a girl. Simple things like hauling feed buckets or trudging along the fence line to check for loose posts turned into mountains I couldn't climb. I'd sit on the wraparound porch instead, the old rocking chair creaking under me, watching the farm hum along without my hands in the dirt. Tom, my husband, and our kids, grown now but still close, picked up the slack. They'd move through the pastures, their voices carrying on the wind, keeping our family's legacy alive while I stayed tethered to that chair. Luna, my miracle mare, never strayed far during those hard days. She'd given up her cozy stall in the barn, choosing instead to linger near the porch. Her hooves would sink into the soft earth just beyond the steps, her chestnut coat catching the fading light as she grazed or simply stood, watching me. Some days, she'd ease closer, resting her big, warm head in my lap. I'd run my fingers along her velvety nose, tracing the faint scars of her rough start, and feel her breath puff against my hands. Her good eye, clear and deep, seemed to see right through me, like she knew something was wrong, something I couldn't fix with a bottle of medicine or a soft word. When I'd sigh, heavy with the weight of it all, she'd shift her weight and nuzzle me, a silent promise she wasn't going anywhere. It was one of those days, the sky a bruised purple with clouds rolling in, that I got stubborn. I'd been staring at my little herb garden from the porch, the lavender and rosemary choked with weeds. The doctors had warned me, no bending, no lifting, nothing to strain my heart. But sitting idle gnawed at me worse than the ache in my chest. I needed to feel useful, even just for a moment. So I shuffled down the steps, my boots scuffing the worn wood, and knelt in the cool, damp soil. The earthy smell filled my lungs as I tugged at the weeds, my hands trembling but steady enough to pull them free. Luna watched from the yard, her ears flicking, her tail swishing like she wasn't sure about this. I'd barely cleared a patch when the world tilted. Darkness swallowed me whole, and the last sound I heard was her sharp, panicked whinny cutting through the quiet. When I came to, it wasn't to the soft rustle of leaves or the familiar creak of the porch. I was surrounded by pitch black, the air stale and tight. My body felt boxed in, pressed against smooth, hard walls. Wood, I realized with a jolt. I couldn't move, couldn't even twitch a finger. Panic clawed up my throat, sharp and cold, as my foggy mind pieced it together. Was I in a coffin? My heart thudded, weak but alive, against the suffocating stillness. Muffled voices seeped through the wood, faint and distorted, like they were coming from another world. I caught Tom's voice among them, rough and breaking, talking about our life, our years together, the farm, me. Tears I couldn't shed burned behind my eyes. They thought I was gone. A funeral. My funeral. I tried to scream, to bang on the lid, anything to let them know I was still here, but my limbs stayed locked, my voice trapped in my chest. The coffin shifted, a gentle sway as if I were being carried. The voices grew louder, a mix of sobs and hushed words, until we stopped. I could smell damp earth through the cracks, the faint tang of grass and stone. My mind spun, terror and confusion tangling together. How had this happened? How could they not know? Then came the chaos, a thunder of hooves, fast and wild, shaking the ground beneath me. Luna's neigh pierced the air, not her usual soft greeting, but a raw, desperate cry that sent shivers down my spine. The coffin jolted hard, rocking with the force of her approach. Voices shouted, Tom's among them, frantic, yelling her name, begging someone to pull her back. But she wouldn't stop. Her hooves slammed into the wood, each strike a deafening crack that sent splinters raining down inside. I felt every blow, the vibrations rattling my bones. The lid groaned under her power, and I wanted to call out, to tell her I was alive, to keep going. But my body wouldn't budge. She hit again, harder, and the air shifted as a seam of light broke through. With one final, earth-shaking kick, the lid flew off, splintered edges tumbling away. Fresh air rushed in, cold and sweet, brushing my face. Luna's muzzle was there, warm and urgent, nudging my cheek. That touch, it was like a switch flipped. My lungs remembered how to work, pulling in a ragged, fiery breath. I bolted upright, gasping, my voice hoarse as I croaked, "What's happening?" The cemetery went dead silent save for Luna's soft, steady nickering. I blinked against the gray light, my eyes stinging as I took in the scene. Gravestones stretched out around me, cold and still. But the people, my family, my friends, stood frozen, their faces drained of color. Tom's eyes were wide, glistening with tears, his mouth open like he couldn't believe what he saw. The kids, our son and daughter, clutched each other, staring at me like I'd risen from a dream. I must have looked like a ghost, sitting there in that shattered coffin, the white burial cloth tangled around me. In a way, I guess I was. Tom moved first, stumbling forward through the grass, his boots slipping as he reached me. "Emily! Oh my God! Emily!" His voice broke as he pulled me into his arms, his hands trembling against my back. His tears soaked into the cloth, hot against my skin, and I clung to him, my own sobs shaking loose. The kids piled in, their hands brushing my face, my arms, my hair, needing to feel me, to know I was real. I could barely see through my tears, but I caught Luna standing a few feet away, her ears pricked forward, her good eye locked on me. She looked almost proud, her chest heaving from the effort, a quiet strength in the way she held herself. Dr. Matthews arrived soon after, summoned by someone in the crowd, probably Tom, shouting into his phone between sobs. The doctor knelt beside the wrecked coffin, his gray hair mussed from the wind, his stethoscope cold against my chest. "Catalepsy," he said after a long pause, his voice steady but tinged with wonder. "Your vital signs dropped so low they were nearly undetectable. Pulse faint, breathing shallow. Standard checks wouldn't catch it." He shook his head, glancing at Luna. "If she hadn't done that, we'd have buried you alive." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak, but I knew it wasn't just luck or science. It was her, my Luna, my fighter. The hours after blurred into a haze. They bundled me into an ambulance, the siren wailing as we sped to the hospital. Tests followed, beeping machines, needles pricking my arm, doctors muttering about my heart. My family hovered, Tom's hand never leaving mine, the kids pacing the sterile halls. Word spread fast through our little town. By nightfall, folks were whispering about the miracle of Luna, their voices buzzing over fences and phone lines. Reporters showed up the next day, cameras flashing, notebooks out, hungry for the story of the horse who broke a coffin to save her owner. They crowded the farm, peering through the gate, snapping pictures of Luna as she grazed, calm as ever. But they didn't see the real story, not the whole of it. It wasn't just that day, that moment. It was everything before. Years back, I'd knelt in Jack's muddy paddock, staring into the cloudy eye of a dying foal nobody wanted. I'd fought for her when everyone else turned away, pouring my heart into every shaky breath she took. Now she'd done the same for me, charging through fear and chaos to pull me back from the edge. It was love, full circle, tying us together tighter than I'd ever imagined. Recovery dragged on, slow and stubborn. My heart still fluttered, weak from whatever had knocked me down, and the doctors piled on rules, rest, medicine, no heavy work. I'd sit on the porch again, wrapped in a quilt, the cool air brushing my face. Luna stayed close, more watchful than ever. She'd plant herself by the railing, her tail swishing lazily, nickering if I stayed inside too long. If I pushed myself, shuffling to the garden or the barn, she'd ease up beside me, her shoulder brushing mine, nudging me back toward the house like she was my nurse. She knew me better than I knew myself some days, her instincts sharp where mine faltered. The coffin ended up in the barn, propped against a wall like some strange keepsake. Its lid hung crooked, Luna's hoof marks gouged deep into the wood, jagged scars of her fight. I'd run my fingers over them sometimes, feeling the rough edges, the splinters catching my skin. It was a reminder of how close I'd come, how thin that line had been. But more than that, it was proof of her, of us. The kids joked she'd made herself my guardian, and they weren't wrong. She'd follow me to the pasture at dawn, her steps matching mine, her breath clouding in the chilly air. The other horses would wander off, grazing or dozing, but Luna stuck by me, her presence steady and warm. People asked me later if I believed in miracles now, their eyes wide with curiosity. I'd smile, brushing it off. I'd always believed, every time a broken animal healed under my care, every time Luna defied the odds. But this was different. It wasn't loud or flashy, no lightning from the sky. It was quiet, fierce. A horse's love cracking through wood, pulling me back when I'd slipped too far. Luna and I, we'd saved each other, and that bond ran deeper than words could touch. She'd been my little moonbeam from the start, and now she was my light in every way that mattered. Thank you for watching. If you like the story, feel free to comment, like, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.